All right, welcome to staff development today. Today, we're going to be talking about developing classroom assessments and what assessments are and look like. For today, you will need an assessment from your classroom, so one that you use. This might be a summative assessment. This would probably be the best option to bring with to the development today. You'll either need a paper copy or an electronic copy, whatever you find most preferable. Today, we're going to be having a variety of information. We're going to be looking at some videos. We're going to be talking to colleagues, sharing out, and working on an assessment that we have, making a few corrections. The first thing we're going to go over is what an assessment is, what they are, what they do, and why we have them. Then we're going to talk about the different types of assessments. We're going to go through how to create the best assessment possible for our students. I will be giving you a set of steps to go through for creating these good assessments that we will be moving forward using in the building. We're also going to be talking about misconceptions and some challenges of assessments. So just to start off, I'm going to give you a minute. I want you to write down on the Post-it note that is on your table what you think of when you hear the word assessment. Go ahead, I will give you 1 minute for this. All right, 1 minute has passed, and now I would like you to share out with the people at your table what you wrote down about what you think about when you hear the word assessment. And then we're going to go ahead and have some people share out. All right, thank you for sharing. I actually had some students do this week in our building to see what they thought of when they thought of assessments. These are some things that we got from them. Some of them you could see they're trying to be a little funny, but a lot of them are similar to different things that you guys said when you thought of the word assessment. Some things that I found common that they had to say was that assessments are scary. They're an essay. They're hard. They're not fun. They're stupid. They're annoying. Not happy about it. Nervous. Stress. Relief after done. Passing. And procrastination. So these are just some of the things that some of our students feel when they think of assessments. So let's talk about what assessment actually is. In education, the term assessment refers to the wide variety of methods or tools that educators use to evaluate, measure, and document the academic readiness, learning progress, skill acquisition, or educational needs of students. The thing is that we can break this stigma of what students and teachers feel like when they hear the word assessment. We just need to know and have the right tools on how to best develop these good assessments. Assessments are used to measure many different things. When thinking about the term assessment, I am sure many of us wrote down things such as scary, hard, bubble sheet, pencil, quiet room, school, and many more negative pieces. We often think of an assessment as a paper pencil formative assessment. This isn't necessarily all it is. We can use assessment in many different ways in the classroom. It can be as simple as a one-word answer or as complex as a 10-page paper. The strategy and logic behind a teacher's reasoning for the assessment is helpful in developing the assessment and the outcome that is being looked for. I could say that I just gave you assessment or a pre-assessment by having you write down on a Post-it note. An assessment can be as small or as large as it needs to be, and that is we're going to talk about that today and how we can use these assessments in different areas. I want to watch this video to introduce what an assessment is and what the 3 key things behind assessment are when building one.
Assessment is the ongoing process of gathering, analysing, and reflecting on evidence of student learning. This evidence is used to make informed judgments about the achievement or capabilities of individuals and cohorts. It can be gathered at any point in the learning process. Quality assessment gives students the best possible opportunity to demonstrate what they know, understand, and can do. It provides meaningful information about students' strengths, learning needs, and achievements. Quality assessment improves teaching and helps students learn. But how do I know I'm designing quality assessment? Well, quality assessment is valid, accessible, and reliable. Valid assessment accurately measures what it sets out to measure. It should reflect curriculum requirements and align to what is taught. Valid assessment uses tasks that reflect the knowledge, understanding, and skills of the learning area. Realistic context invites students to demonstrate their breadth, depth, and range of what they know and can do. Accessible assessment clearly defines what students must do to demonstrate their learning. The layout and visual design minimize distractions, while the language used is clear and unambiguous. Accessible assessment allows for equal participation. It ensures the requirements are transparent and avoids bias. Reliable assessment produces consistent, dependable, and repeatable results. Reliable assessments and task-specific standards are accurate and precise. When an assessment is repeated, the results agree with previous results. Marks awarded by one marker compare well with those of another. Quality assessment is valid, accessible, and reliable. It allows all students to demonstrate their learning.
All right. So thinking about those three pieces moving forward. So just a little bit of background information on where assessments came from and what they are for. Assessments have always been a tool used to evaluate a situation, whether this be on how to hunt for food many years ago or how to do a physics problem. Assessments have been important to humans for a very long time. The use of assessments in a guide for improvements to teach and learn has a long history in the education world. Formative assessments was identified nearly 4 decades ago. Learning progress of students was given through a formative assessment and feedback. Benjamin Bloom is the first to initiate the phrase formative assessments. Assessments have come a long way over time. Thinking back to my own school career and now, they are very different. We have learned so much on how to make good assessments and how to do informal assessments. Assessments define attributes that are assumed to have value for a society at large. The ability to remember things that one has been taught in logical fluency and academic literacy, culture references, and the ability to perform structured tasks under time constraints. Assessments are often used to categorize people and place people. Assessments are often so important they can determine the colleges that people attend. Assessments are routinely used to make judgments about the appropriate placement of students within educational systems. Assessments are the primary mechanism by which we judge and allocate social definitions of merit and distribute attainment. Assessments are designed to signal alert consumers of education which organizations are most likely to serve their interests. Assessments are used to allocate resources to various organizations within the education sector, and assignments are used to make normative comparisons among demographic groups, among political jurisdictions, and among educational systems internally. Assessments and the underlying assumptions about social order that they represent are assumed to be part of the natural order of how education should be analyzed and administered. We create and put so much emphasis on assessments that it is important that we know how to best create them. Here's a brief video about some history of assessments.
In the beginning, assessment was simple. We'd give something a try. It was obvious when we did not succeed. And it was obvious when we did. This became known as learning. Then formal education arrived. And we invented universities and lecture halls, lesson plans, and final exams. We tested students to see if they learned anything. And then we assessed our own effectiveness as teachers through anecdotal questionnaires and subjective end-of-semester surveys. And this might have been enough when we were graduating high school and college students to take predictable jobs with predictable career paths. But today, educators and students are part of a rapidly changing world. 21st century learners must be able to synthesize knowledge, communicate clearly with others, and create solutions to problems that we don't even know exist. Which means students need personalized, engaging, useful feedback on meaningful work, not multiple choice exams and unexplained letter grades. So whether you're teaching accountants, engineers, artists, welders, scientists, or nurses, your students need detailed feedback on meaningful work so they can become learners, not simply graduates.
All right. So let's dive into learning about the two basic types of assessment that there are. Summative assessments is one of them. These are used to evaluate student learning at the conclusion of a specific instructional period. And then there's formative assessments. These are administered multiple times during a unit or course or an academic program. They're a little bit smaller and not as large as the summative assessment. Formative assessments are commonly said to be for learning because educators use the results to modify and improve teaching techniques during an instructional period, while summative assessments are said to be of learning because they evaluate academic achievement at the conclusion of an instructional period. So let's just talk a little bit about both of these. Summative assessments describe the degree of knowledge or proficiency attained at the accumulation of a program of the student, and formative assessments provide an ongoing diagnosis to assist educators when adjusting instruction and enhancing student achievement. I've learned over time that after graduating from college, many teachers forget how to use a formative and summative assessments best throughout their class. Many often don't do formative assessments because of the work that it takes. It is easier to teach and assume students know than to help them and be prepared. Formative assessments can help them be successful as teachers change their teaching based on the formative assessments. Formative assessments are in-process evaluations of student learning that are typically administered multiple times during a unit, course, or academic program. The general purpose of a formative assessment is to give educators in-process feedback about what students are learning or not learning so that instructional approaches, teaching materials, and academic support can be modified accordingly. A formative assessment in your classroom may include a short quiz, a paper, a group project, an exit ticket, a verbal check, something such as raising your hand or using your thumb to tell how much you know and don't understand. And there's many other creative ways that you can do formative assessments. I'm going to give you 1 minute to turn and tell your table about what type of formative assessments you most often use in your classroom. Great. And then I'm going to have a couple people share out as a whole. Thanks for sharing. So, formative assessments work because they can identify the gap between where learners are now and where they are going. It can offer descriptive feedback to support learners in closing the gap, and it facilitates processes and provides tools to involve learners in addressing their learning needs. Formative assessments can be very helpful when used appropriately. As long as teachers are willing to put in the work, they can drive how students will be successful in their summative assessments. Summative assessments are used to evaluate student learning at the conclusion of a specific instructional period, typically at the end of a unit, course, semester, program, or school year. Summative assessments are typically scored in graded tests, assignments, or projects that are used to determine whether students have learned what they were expected to learn during the defined instructional period. In schools today and in our school building, we call these CSAs, Common Summative Assessments. I want you to turn and tell your colleagues how you use the information from the Common Summative Assessments to drive your teaching in the future. All right, we'll bring it back together. I would say more often than not, teachers don't even check out the CSA scores. Many think they're done with the unit and they want to move on. It is important that we use these CSAs, though, and the information gathered to help us in the future. As easy as it is for a summative assessment to be done with a trimester and move on, submitting your grades, it is important that you make adjustments, write down notes, and things that can help in your teaching for the future and the year to follow. By making these notes, it'll very much so help your teaching when you go back to teach this unit next year. So, what are we going to do as a building? Regular formative assessments paired with well-planned collective activities offer one of the most powerful tools teachers can use. Teachers need to have a strong understanding of standards-based curriculum, of power standards, and of assessment skills and strategies. It is important that we as educators understand how to make the best assessments possible. We will be going over a common outline to follow when creating an assessment. Whether this be a formative assessment or a summative assessment, these guidelines will work well for meeting the objectives. I want you to start by turning and telling your colleagues how you develop your assessments. What do you start with? All right, and then let's share out. I will have a couple people do that. Thank you for sharing. So, in creating good test items, we should address not only what was taught, but also how it was taught. It is important that we put thought and time into our assessments and our planning. After looking through many articles and research, it is found that there is a common thread in the suggestion of steps to take and prepare for assessments for students. By having these common steps, we can provide validity for our assessments in our school. We as a staff will be using common steps put together by a group of teachers and admin on how to create assessment. These are the steps that we will be taking. 1. Clearly state standards that the test will measure. Begin with the end in mind. 2. Make sure questions are presented clearly with wording that was used while teaching in the classroom. 3. Make sure weight of question points relates to the difficulty of level of the question. 4. Make sure format is clear and easy to understand. 5. Don't use trick questions. 6. Avoid lengthy assessments with unnecessary questions. 7. Use language that students can understand, common classroom language, and avoid vague terms. 8. Use directions, reminders throughout the test with symbols that prompt students to pay attention to directions. 9. Provide choice. That's a lot to think about. Once you start using those every day, it'll become more natural to you. We're going to break these down into more detail. There is a handout on your table that has all these listed. I would like you to bring this back to your classroom with you so you know what steps we will be taking when creating these assessments. So number 1, clearly state standards that the test will measure, beginning with the end in mind. It is important at the beginning of each unit that you clearly state the standards to students. This could be a target sheet you pass out to them. This could be something you put on the wall. It might look different in every classroom. With these standards in mind, think about how you want them to show their understanding, how you will analyze if they meet the standards or not. It is important that you identify this at the beginning so that this drives your instruction during the middle, and it will drive your formative instruction into your summative. 2, make sure questions are presented clearly with wording that was used while teaching in the classroom. Be consistent. Students need routine and familiarity. Keeping terms similar on a quiz as you use them in the classroom is important. Don't use crazy words that you have not used before. Keep terms similar when you use definitions. We're not trying to trick students, we are trying to help them. Make sure weight of question points relate to the difficulty of the level of question. This is for scoring purposes, and it's exactly what it states. Make sure you're valuing each question as many points as it should be worth to stay consistent in your grading. 4, make sure format is clear and easy to understand. Often there is unnecessary information and space on assessments. Make sure it's as clear as possible. Keep the same format of the paper of the questions if possible for each assessment. The more clear and predictable it is, the better it is for students. 5, don't use trick questions. Our goal isn't to trick students into picking the incorrect answer. Our goal is to evaluate what they know. There may be difficult questions, but avoid trick questions. 6, avoid lengthy assessments with unnecessary questions. To avoid confusion, make sure you're using short sentences that are straightforward and getting to the point. Do not make tests extremely long because you would like them to take longer or want to have more questions. Get to the point, have them take it, and be done. In our building, our students are in middle school, and their attention span and their reading and focus and the class period time doesn't allow for a lengthy assessment. Common summative assessments shouldn't be more than 35 questions at the end of the unit. 7, use language that students can understand, common classroom language, and avoid vague terms. Avoid vague terms and get straight to the point. 8, use directions, reminders throughout the tests with symbols that prompt students to pay attention to directions. This may be arrows, bold, underlined, colored. Add these in as cues to help students remember directions. It's also helpful to add pictures to explain the questions better. Things you may provide for EL students and modified assignments benefit students with regular assessments also. You can still use these things without giving away the answers. 9, provide choice. Students like choice. You may, for example, give them the option to do a different type of assessment. You could do assessment A, B, or C to show your understanding. You also could have 23 questions and tell them they only need to do 20 questions. Giving students choice in how they're learning is helpful and makes them feel in control and that they have power over their education. All right, after all of that being said, I want you to use the assessment that you brought and try out these steps to fix the assessment. If you're sitting at a table with your CTs, you may work on this with them. I'll be giving you 10 minutes. Look over these different steps and see if you need to fix anything or change something on your tests. So I will be giving you 10 minutes. All right, we'll stop right there. Thank you for taking time to do this. At the end, we'll have time where you can ask questions to different colleagues and different admin if you have questions when you are going through trying to work with your quizzes. So before we go, I just want to talk a little bit about the misconceptions and challenges that we are going to be seeing when starting to do this. There are many misconceptions about assessments. You can see this in how those students described assessments earlier with the post-it notes that I showed you. We can break these stigmas and break these misconceptions about assessments. Some misconceptions that we did identify at the beginning, but I would like to reiterate, are that assessments can be hard, assessments can be scary, assessments take a lot of time, assessments tell if a teacher is good or bad, assessments tell if a student is good or bad. We can we can break these stigmas with the assessments that we create in our classroom. We need to think about the language that we use. We need to think about how we portray assessments in the classroom. It is a challenge to go about assessments this way. It will be a challenge and take you longer to go through each step. I believe that this will help our students and help our staff be more successful. I believe within the next year, after going through and doing these steps, we will see student success and achievement in tests and areas that we didn't see before. That is all that I have for you today. I want to thank you for participating with this activity. I hope you learned something. If you do have any comments or questions, feel free to stay after and let me know.